Hello, everyone, and welcome to Samuel's Racing Show. I have a feeling we're going to have a few first-time viewers today, just due to the nature of what went on this weekend. So, hi, I'm Samuel Ryman, the host, and I'm joined by a friend of mine for over 10 years now, Joe. Coming up 10 years, Joe Peak.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And I'm not surprised that you invited me on, considering our two biases, if you will. But I'm looking forward to discussing this.
Yeah, so I was born in England. I live in America. I've got my Murray Walker shirt on today. You can't really see him in the image, but I was a huge Murray Walker fan growing up, and it was I think at the end of the day, it was great that we had a memorable British Grand Prix. The first British Grand Prix since the passing of Murray, and obviously we're here to talk about a particular incident from that race. That being said, I'm more of a Ferrari Verstappen fan. I respect the heck out of Lewis Hamilton, but I'm tired of him winning the whole time. Joe, you're a bit more on the Mercedes side of things normally.
Yeah, typically, and I'm definitely a Hamilton fan. And I have certain beef with some things with Ferrari in the past, but recently I've softened up on them. I actually am a bit of a Leclerc fan, so that was disappointing on that end, not seeing him get the win that day. But that's a whole nother topic.
Oh, well, we're going to cover plenty of topics from the race, that's for sure. Let's start with the one thing we can both agree with, and unfortunately we got to bring it up, is that no matter how much we attack certain aspects of Lewis Hamilton's personality or driving style during this conversation, we both are in agreement that we condemn the online racist abuse that Lewis Hamilton has received as a result of yesterday's incident. I always like to think back to Dr. King's quote, Joe, of let's judge a person based off of their character and not on the color of their skin. Doesn't mean we can't condemn what Lewis did, but we're condemning it as an act of his racing, his racing tactics rather than who he is as an individual.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, obviously, there was a whole sprint race. Hamilton on pole for that. Verstappen wins the sprint race, gets to start the race from pole. Hamilton tries 3 or 4 different attacks coming into Copse corner. Verstappen squeezes him against the wall, but they both kind of have time to get back on their lines before they get to the corner. Hamilton loses a bit of air on his front wing, goes in a bit hot, misses the apex. Verstappen's not really doing him any favors either, kind of only giving him a lane and a half to play with. It's the opening lap of a race. There is another passing opportunity 4 turns down the road, Hannah Straight, where Hamilton probably would have tried again if he hadn't pulled it off in Copse. And the collision happens. Later on, the teams do all their radio, email, whatever to the stewards, to Michael Massey, and they give Hamilton a 10-second time penalty. He goes to win the race anyway. What are your thoughts, Joe?
So my thoughts are, I feel like there is not blame that you can put on one party over the other to the extent that it merits a penalty. To me, a racing incident basically comes down to you have 2 parties, each party has a little bit to blame, or neither is really fully enough to blame that you can say, yeah, this is pretty much almost completely on them. And then you can hand out a penalty to them if that's the case. For me, this is a racing incident. I know there are those who will deeply disagree. And though I will admit that, yes, Hamilton did run a little bit wide, but to me, that is something that happens when you're racing hard and something that happens when, of course, you're going to pinch someone in. And I feel like that you could argue that Verstappen as well could have given a little bit more space, knowing the position he put him in. I also heavily disagree with Red Bull saying he wasn't alongside. If you watch the footage, he was pretty far alongside him. You could see the front wing, even with the onboard camera. That to me says he had presentation. I disagree with the penalty. I am glad to see that it kind of, I wouldn't say was mooted, but glad to see that it didn't ruin the race, essentially. If it would have given us a boring race, I would be a lot more frustrated, but I'm glad in the end we still got great entertainment out of it.
So I went into the race, even though I'm enjoying Verstappen leading the points and all that, the fact that it was Hamilton's home race and the fact that he had, upon Murray Walker's passing, he posted to social media some good words about his memories of Murray. And Murray Walker was kind of, I think it was a sticker or a decal. He was part of a trophy, like the trophy, that the race winners trophy honored Murray Walker. And I actually went into this race thinking, okay, I don't mind if Lewis wins this. When the incident happened, obviously, when it's full 100% speed and we're just watching from the external cameras, I was, so you don't really have time to judge exactly what happened. I was frustrated, not too surprised that the incident had happened. And then when you went back and watched a replay, Verstappen, I think what happened, I think there were two different mentalities going into the term. Verstappen does a block on Lewis and then returns to his racing line. And I think his thought was, okay, I know Lewis is alongside me, but he's going to back out, which he was doing, I think. Lewis was kind of in the process of backing out. And then, he's probably going to try me again down the Hannah Straight, but I've got him cleared for now. Whereas Lewis's mentality up until the last moment was, okay, I'm still going to give it everything I've got here. I'm going to try and get ahead of him, maybe try and pull ahead through what they call it, maggots and beckets, because of the aero wash and all that. And Verstappen doesn't have the top end speed in his Red Bull to really challenge me down the Hannah Straight. So maybe Lewis did feel legitimately he could have pulled the move off in Cop's corner. But there's also part of me, Joe, I almost looked at it kind of like Rosberg's mentality from the 2014 Belgian Grand Prix, where it's not that Hamilton wanted a collision. It's not that Rosberg wanted the collision at Belgium in 2014. He just wasn't going to be the one that stopped it from happening.
He forced his hand, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, and actually, I agree with you on that. And that to me is partly why I consider it a racing incident, is because you look at both of them and say, well, both could have done something to stop it. And that's why, yeah, I don't like the result of it, but I'm also not surprised. To me, the mutual respect they showed, I knew that was out of a genuine mutual respect to one another, but I also knew that as close as they were racing earlier in the season, there would come a point where something would go wrong. It's not going to be able to last the way that it did, where we had the really clean, hard racing between them. I mean, they even kind of got a little lucky in Imola when you consider that Verstappen went wide into Hamilton. So, and again, this is why I kind of go pragmatic about it, because I feel like the tables could turn later down the line. Verstappen could make a marginal move that either of them could back out of, and it could wind up Hamilton being the one getting the worst of it. So
yeah, you kind of get the impression it might not be the last time they come together this season.
I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot more of those two doing that. This is honestly, I feel like this is the Hill Schumacher of our generation.
Yeah, it is the Senna Prost. It's
exactly.
The red versus blue in a way. That's what makes Formula One great. Those are the things that make legendary seasons. In particular, I think when it comes from two different teams, that you got Party A cheering for one person, Party B cheering for the second person. They both deserve to win the championship. Points-wise, there are two things I look at optimistically on the Verstappen side of things, points-wise. First is that this kind of just makes up for the points that Hamilton lost on the last lap at Baku. Granted, Verstappen was going to win that race, but that was more of just bad luck. And secondly, Verstappen didn't leave a weekend with nothing. He still got 3 points from Saturday. So, there's that to it. As for my thoughts on the penalty itself, I'm not surprised there was a penalty, and I kind of thought there would be. And the reason why is because that's the kind of world that Formula One lives in right now, a world where if someone is majoritarily, I'm pronouncing that wrong, to blame for an incident, that they deserve a penalty. Yes, Verstappen didn't do Hamilton any favors, but at the end of the day, the collision was Hamilton's fault. he's the one who overshot the turn and slid into Verstappen and did it at a corner where there was, it was at high speed. There was a high chance of a dangerous incident, which there was. Unfortunately, Verstappen's okay. I guess the difference, the point that you bring up, the difference between this wreck and Russell getting his penalty for getting into Carlos Sainz, which I also kind of feel is justified, is that Russell had like 5 car lengths on the inside. He didn't have to hit Sainz. He just slipped up and did. It's not like Sainz was pinching him down. He was caught off guard. So yeah, I definitely understand why some people may argue that Russell's penalty may be even more justified than Hamilton's.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because that to me is another big talking point on this, that we are dealing with pretty small margins. Now, obviously in F1 terms, like there was a pretty wide gap between himself and the apex if it was just him, but we have to remember this is in context when he's racing offline. And
what are we talking about?
Hamilton going into cops. When he's racing on an unfamiliar line, going into a corner, using a direction that he's not used to, and like you said, there's all kinds of aero wash happening from the side draft happening there. You have to think that, okay, this is going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of variables that they maybe don't know how it's going to play out. Now, like you said, with the case of Russell, he had all that space on the inside, and we're talking much wider margins where it's like, yeah, you goofed. Or in this one, again, that's why I make the argument there. I don't think that deserved a penalty. We're talking about tiny little things like that, where it's like anybody could have made that mistake. And obviously even professionals like Verstappen and Hamilton can make it that high a level. I don't think we should be handing out penalties for infinitesimal little things like that, unless it's something, that can be actually measured to that infinitesimal level, such as the track limits.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people with an opinion like yours, Joe, and I think there's a lot of people with an opinion like mine. So it will be interesting seeing how things going forward. We're going to Hungary next, so that'll be interesting to see in a couple of weeks' time. But let's bring up the last part of a Hamilton Verstappen conversation, and then we can talk about a couple other aspects of a race, if you will, and that is the post-race reactions. So Lewis Hamilton on the podium or during the press conference wasn't really taking blame upon himself. I'm not sure if he knew Verstappen was in hospital, but he kind of wasn't too fussed about Verstappen, or he gave the impression that he wasn't. And a lot of people haven't taken too kindly up onto how Hamilton was celebrating post-race, including Max Verstappen himself, who took to social media saying it's very disrespectful seeing Hamilton celebrating while he was sitting in the hospital. So what are your thoughts on all that?
This one's tough, because part of it is we don't know what Hamilton knew exactly. I guess once they make it available, like what happened on the radios, because I've seen certain sites will have transcripts, then we can know exactly what he knew. From what we were fed by the TV, all he knew was that he was told he's out of the car and he's okay. If he knew that he was in hospital still getting checks, I think maybe he could have toned it down a little bit. I think it's a little disingenuous that Max says that he feels like it's disrespectful, because I'm pretty certain Max would be celebrating like hell up there too.
Yeah, I was a little surprised about that.
Yeah. We're talking about the same guy that came after a race and tried to shove someone because he felt like he overtook him wrong in a lapped car situation. I know he's grown some since then, but I don't think Max has grown enough that you wouldn't see him celebrating up on top of there. But now we're talking about hypotheticals, which I don't like to get into on this. I want to try and deal with like the actual things that happened here. And that's kind of where I stand. I want to know what Hamilton knew before I really say like, he kind of took that wrong. And right now, as far as I know, he didn't know enough.
Well, I'll throw this one last hypothetical on the Hamilton Verstappen thing here. How do you think Maury Walker would have reacted to all that?
I think Walker would be apoplectic. I think that he would have loved the hell out of that race. Honestly, I wish I could have heard him call that one because that would have been a joy. That I remember when you texted me and you said it was a classic. Afterwards, my thought was Murray would have made that a classic. That would have been one that have the one-liners and moments that would be parts of compilations for years to come.
No, my text to you was it's already a classic. And just so you know, you probably didn't know this. Yeah, sorry, I've been petting my cat while I've been talking. My text came after lap one.
Interesting.
It was a classic right off the get-go. You know, we knew this, and we also knew that Hamilton probably was going to get a penalty, whether we agreed with it or not. I think we all knew the writing was on the wall. I don't know. Maybe you disagree
Austria
with
that. kind of made me think that. What we've seen on those sort of contacts. Yeah.
So at that point, we all knew it was going to be an interesting race because Verstappen wasn't going to win. And if Hamilton was going to win, he was going to have to beat the likes of Leclerc, Norris, and Bottas, which he did. So, and, you know, it turned out to be a good race. I mean, if you're a Formula One PR person, it turned out to be the best race in a long time.
A controversy gives them free press, essentially. Yeah. That's
it was on CBS this morning.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you, with your text about being already a classic and whatnot, that was vague enough that, I hate spoilers. So I really appreciate that. But with things unfolding with Norris being a McLaren fan, I kept hoping, oh my gosh, a British team winning the British Grand Prix, that's got to make him happy. Like, you call it a classic. My brain was going through what's going to make Sam happy. So
no, 30 laps in, I had no idea who was going to win. When I sent that text to you, I'm like, I hope this doesn't age badly. It didn't.
No, it aged perfectly. You called it right on. There was honestly, I think that's what made that race so great. And I think the impartial observer has to love that race, because dramatic moments happened. There were a lot of protagonists that could have had great, good feeling stories, underdogs that could have come through. And it also had kind of an interesting traditional story arc, if you will. I know we're getting kind of into the weeds of commentators and storytellers here, but to me, it presented itself in that sort of traditional story fashion that really, like we said, it's going to go down as a classic.
And we're going to be talking about it a lot over the next 2 weeks because, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of racing going on this weekend. I think Formula E is at London and others. Do you still keep up with Formula E, Joe?
I do. And I've been loving it this season. I know I shouldn't get into it because there's all kinds of controversies there that I'd love to get into. But despite those, I've been enjoying it. I've actually had a personal touch with it because my brother worked with the company that helped go through the various temporary structures in New York and make sure that they were safe. So he was sending me photos that I am not allowed to share that was showing me behind the scenes and whatnot of that all getting set up, which is very cool.
So what I'll say about Formula E is I've been watching the highlights. I haven't been able to catch all of the races live. And one thing that's a little disenfranchising, I'm getting all my words wrong today. It must be this t-shirt.
I was going to say, it's very Murray of you.
Is the fact that, some of the bigger teams are pulling out. Their names now are sports car driver names, not necessarily XF1 driver names. They're still high quality names. But the race that's going to stick with me at the end of this year for Formula E is the one in Monaco. And I hope Formula E doesn't become that, where it's like Monaco to Formula E is like the Indy 500 of Indianapolis, where it's like there's a handful of people who pay attention to the whole season, but everyone tunes in for that one event, I don't know.
I'm actually not against that.
Huh?
I was going to say, I'm not against that because I think you're always going to have casual fans. And I think we're too harsh on casual fans because you and I are very hardcore about our racing. And yes, I would like people to learn more, but I feel like we need to understand we can't have the health of a lot of these racing series without a lot of people getting involved. So you kind of need those fans that might tune in for one or two for the special ones because they help keep it going. They help pump money in and whatnot. And if anything, a lot of times casual fans become hardcore fans. So how do you hook them other than you get them started?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I think our agreement there is that Formula E at Monaco was awesome. I know this is
I hope they do that layout again.
Yeah, I know that was a couple of months ago, but I still remember that was a good fun race. Well, I guess we're going to agree to disagree, Joe. But at the end of the day, we can agree that this Formula One season is quite intense. And the thing I love about it is that if no matter who wins at the end of the season, whether it be Hamilton or Verstappen, there's not going to be one turning point where we say, oh, this is a race where they lost 25 points or whatever that cost them the championship. There are multiple chapters in this story already, and there's going to keep being them. It's just, honestly, it's just a long overdue ride that we've been needing. And I really hope that Verstappen doesn't start driving over his head too much now to try and beat Hamilton like Vettel did 4 years ago. When Vettel was just dominating the championship in the Ferrari, he had that one bad incident, one bad race at Germany, and then it just seemed like he couldn't get it together after that. I hope we don't see Verstappen have the same kind of breakdown, and I don't think he will.
I don't think so either. My bigger fear is that he might revert to some of his more cutthroat ways from his earlier seasons. I know you've heard me criticize him for those in the past. And honestly, I've been very happy in the past 2 or 3 seasons seeing him start to learn and grow as a driver, to be a little bit more respectful, a little more fair with his rivals. And I've been impressed by that. And I felt like he was doing really good this season with that. My worry is that this is going to kind of turn a switch in his head and say, okay, if that's how we're racing, he suddenly gets super aggressive on him. And I think that's going to go south very quickly if the two of them wind up that way.
Well, hopefully at the least we'll be in for a safe season, even if a few more front wings end up getting bent. At least the next track is a low speed one, Hungary. So
yeah, but that's had so much drama in the last 8 years or so. So yeah. I expect if the trend to continue there.
We'll find out in 2 weeks. All right. Thanks for coming, Joe, and see you all around.
See ya.